Chapter 14, Revelations. Rener Calo. The meeting with the Emperor and the war generals would take all my energy away. I was sure of that. It was, how should I put it? Essential, but nasty. I understood the urgency of such a meeting, but to continue with it until the breaking of dawn was, to me, unnecessary. The war generals were seated around a long table, and I caught one or two stifling a yawn. The Emperor was sitting at the head of the table, and although his eyes were red from being up all night waiting for all of the war generals to reach Canela, he looked quite alert and more than ready for this meeting. Next to him, the chair remained empty. It was not to be sat on. Not until he had appointed someone who he thought worthy enough to serve as his right hand. Everybody was silent, uncertain of what was to come next. What happened to the conquests? The Emperor asked, breaking the ice. Paterno Ronaldo kept silent. As we all know, he stayed in the palace and had not left the Emperor's side. Rizalo Agia was the first to open his mouth. It humbles me, Your Grace, to bring forth to the table some information I gathered from the West. The royal scribe is dead. I watched the Emperor's face in silence. It did not change. If I may, I said. But that is not what I believe to be true. The Emperor's gray eyes pierced me. Continue, he said. I had an encounter with a beautiful woman. It sickens me that I had not seen her before. If not for one of my men, I wouldn't have thought it was she. If you had chanced upon her, why is she not with you, General Calo? The Emperor hissed. I was surprised at the sudden change in his mood. General Akean Noto twisted in his seat. His eyes bore the haughtiness of a man who had some information to share. Because General Calo's loyalty is waning. Several generals hissed, and I clenched my fist. It was an accusation that would have made me ask him to a duel if I had not been a patient and understanding man. The Emperor squinted his eyes at General Noto. There's no need for that, Akean. Rener knows what awaits any general who strays from his path. He wouldn't do that, the Emperor said steely as though it was a threat. Then he looked at me. You say that Lamare Amark is alive? He said. This seemed to astound him, although his face still bore the semblance of masked surprise. If I were to take the word of my man, I would say yes, Your Grace. Do you trust your man? With my life. The Emperor seemed to think this over. But that is impossible, he spoke softly as though to himself. We waited for him to speak up again. The Emperor had his flaws, and I was one of those who believed that his rule needed to end. Eccentric as he may seem, he still warranted a speck of curiosity to me, why he was the way he was. All of a sudden, he stood up and slammed his fists on the table. Tell me, why didn't you bring her here? He shouted. His eyes were glaring menacingly at me. I swallowed before answering. She was lost in the woods. I tried to go after her, but she was lost to us. Akean Noto was smirking opposite me. He seemed satisfied. Your Grace, Paterno said, the instructions were clear. Bring the boy back to the palace. Nothing was said about the royal scribe. It is a sin to presume, Paterno. Just because it was not stated explicitly does not mean that it wasn't demanded of you, he hissed. Then that is a presumption too, wouldn't you say, Your Grace? Paterno asked. He met the Emperor's stare, and for that, I admired Paterno Ronaldo. There were times that I had hoped to catch a word with him, see if he would join the masked warriors and me in our rebellion, but the man was as slippery as an eel. He was within my grasp, but each time I tried to talk to him seriously, he wriggled away as though he knew my intention, and in turn, chose not to dishonor himself by plotting a rebellion. The Emperor shook with rage. It is not the same. Akean cleared his throat. Your Grace, I captured the boy, he said. All eyes were immediately upon Akean. If you captured him, then where is he? The Emperor asked. His eyes had a dangerous glow. I lost him in a mare. Everybody around the table was holding his breath. The seconds passed as though they were years, and yet nobody stirred. The Emperor was still standing up, his eyes fixed upon Akean's face. Wasn't the instruction that was sent to you clear? To deliver the boy to the palace as soon as he is captured? Forgive me, your grace. But news reached me that you visited the Ameresian queen in her palace, and to deliver the boy to you faster, I decided to meet you in Amer. Then why was it that I didn't see you there? I came the day you left. I presented the boy to the queen, hoping that Her Majesty would somehow send a message to you and request you back, but it wasn't what happened. The queen berated me for taking the boy captive, and in the middle of the night, the boy escaped. Akean finished. I will strip you off of your title. The emperor blurted out. Akean's face paled. I beg you to hear my story first, your grace, before any harsh decision is made, Akean began. I brought the boy to the queen, knowing that she is your mother, and being your mother, I had hoped that she would know how to handle the child. But do you know what she did? She took the boy into her care. Washed him, fed him, and all but released him back into the world. As far as I know, she tricked me into allowing the boy to escape. I searched for the boy, but he was nowhere to be found. He paused. If there's anyone who betrayed you, your grace, it wasn't me but your mother, Queen Marcella Benilda of Amer. The emperor covered his face with his right hand as though he was slapped. He collapsed on his seat as though energy was drained out of him. Do you believe that, Akean? He asked in a voice that was strained with emotion. There is no evidence that says otherwise, Akean said. The emperor shook his head in dismay. It is done, then. It is done, he repeated over and over. When he looked up at us, his eyes were calmer, subtler against the darkness. The burning lamps were reflected in them, and though his anger had vanished, I feared the tumult that he was restraining. The emperor raised his hand and asked Turan Aragar, who was seated beside him, to move his head closer to him. He whispered something to him, and Turan nodded. It will be done, your grace, he murmured. All of us were waiting for further instructions, but none came. Akean, you have proven yourself worthy. You will be rewarded, the emperor said. Turan will see to it. Akean Noto beamed. He smiled smugly and eased in his seat. There's a change in my orders, the emperor said. Kill him. Kill the boy. I don't want to let him loose in Akean. There's no need for me to meet him anymore. If you see him, show no mercy. Allow no trace of compassion to run in your veins. Kill him. Nothing will please me more. This is my order. And then bring the corpse here. The emperor's eyes took us all in. I could only assume that, right now, he was using his gift of charm on us, because no matter how vile the words that came out of his mouth, not one among us objected. Like puppets, we listened and took the order to heart. What else do I need to know about? The emperor asked. The other generals stirred in their seats, and several of them opened their mouths to speak of their journey, but none was as noteworthy as what Akean revealed. You will swear to me again, the emperor said when each general had spoken. You will renew your vows. You are my men, and together, we will rule Akean. Turan edged closer to the emperor. He whispered something in his ear. Right, the emperor said. Kill Dogan Ronda too. He betrayed my trust. He is not to set foot again in the palace. I remembered the huge man with an untidy and hideous face and felt sorry for him. He had served the emperor well, but he had defected. And for that, the emperor would show no mercy, as any emperor also would not. There was a loud banging outside the door. The door opened wide, and a soldier's pale face peered through. There are ghosts in the palace yards, your grace, he said. My apologies for disturbing your discussion. The emperor stood up immediately and, without thinking, shoved the soldier against the wall. What ghosts are you talking about? Ghosts, your grace, he said in a stutter. Ghosts that make the tent flaps move. Ghosts that fill the death tents now. That was all we heard before the emperor released the young soldier. He rushed out, and all war generals trailed after him. The ghosts that were littering the death tents would be dealt with. This would be a perfect opportunity to make the emperor believe in me again. We started running outside, swords drawn, ready to fight, maybe not for the emperor, but for a principle. If it came to death, I would die with honor.